Hey there, lady. My name is Molly Conley, and I'm devoted to helping women reinvent their love lives, whether that's after divorce, dating on and off the apps, or in their committed relationship. Why? Because I've been there. I'm a former college athlete who filed for divorce 3 years into marriage, swam in the online dating pool into my late 30s, and now I am married to the man of my spreadsheet dreams who I met 4 months before the world shut down. As a dating and relationship coach, I help my clients shift the focus from being obsessed with finding Mr. Right to shifting to herself as Miss Right Now. We build a foundation filled with clarity, connection, and confidence, knowing she is worth waiting for. Each week on the podcast, I'll bring you love life insights and savvy guests, where you will receive the courage to release programmed limiting beliefs. Discover patterns and behaviors restricting you from finding and attracting quality men, and ways to choose yourself first so you can build a foundation for a healthy relationship with yourself and a partner. Hey there, lady. Welcome back to another episode of Reinventing the Arena podcast. Today is a couch conversation with my husband, Brad.
Hello. Sorry, I apologize for my voice. Just getting over being sick still a little bit, but I think I can get through it.
Yeah, thanks, honey, so much, because, being sick is not fun, and I appreciate you joining and sharing for today. A few weeks ago, I had sent out a survey to my email list and asked a few followers as well if they would fill it out. And when doing so, I noticed there was this theme, usually around issues that you're facing when you're dating. And one of those was finding men who have done the inner work. I'm going to say I remember this being an issue for myself as well. I was so frustrated. I thought I was going to have to settle for a man who didn't give a shit about working on himself, or like the worst situation of like settling for a man child. So I would take another break from online dating and focus on myself. At the time in 2019, I hopped back on the apps in the fall, and lo and behold, I met Brad 2 months later. But what gave me the clue that Brad was doing the inner work? Let me just say that it was in his profile on Match. And then I saw him walk the talk and put it to use when we first started dating, and he still does it now. So, babe, before we start diving into your experience with inner work, what are your thoughts with what I just said?
Well, I definitely think you're right. The inner work is never done. You can always grow and improve in some aspect of yourself or your life. Self-awareness is not a given for everyone. I've definitely learned that. Self-awareness is a learned skill, and it's vital to any sort of inner work or self-improvement.
Yeah, definitely agree. Self awareness is definitely the first step to doing the inner work. So let's think back a bit. Before I met you, what were you like before starting working on yourself, doing that inner work?
Well, I would say during my first marriage, I was not very self-aware at all. I had a lot of behaviors that were part of my personality that just came from me growing up in the family and environment that I did. It wasn't bad. It's not, bad by nature, but I wasn't aware of my background and how I was raised, and especially how my own immediate family dynamics affected my relationship at that time. I had a very narrow point of view or frame of reference for what relationships should be like. And I never really asked myself why I held those views or why I did what I did or acted the way I acted. I just displayed certain behavioral patterns when it came to my relationship.
So, with all of that, what led you to start the process of doing the inner work?
I would say the very first step was actually about toward the end of my first marriage. I was kind of going through the motions of trying to save things, even though I knew at that point I already knew it was beyond saving. But anyway, I did end up reading a book called Boundaries, and it really just hit on so many aspects of why I behaved the way I did and how it affected my relationship. There were a lot of aha moments for me in reading that book, and it was kind of the first time I've read a book that did that to me. I realized why my ex might feel a certain way based on how I was acting when it came to my boundaries with my family and my friends. I remember trying to mark up certain pages and passages and basically writing on about every page, and that's not something I ever did when I read books. But that was the first time after I got done with that I started thinking there's probably things about myself I want to change so this doesn't happen again, because I knew I was at the end of that relationship, and I knew that while not completely my fault, there was things I could work on to make my next relationship better.
Yeah, and that makes sense too because, like I said earlier, we all can do the inner work. We all have things to work on and it never really is done. So, taking that time and having that self-awareness right there, like we mentioned before, was really key. What steps do you remember taking to try to work on your previous marriage?
So we did go to therapy as a couple twice, I believe, and then I went by myself a few more times. And I honestly did, I guess, enjoy it for lack of a better word. I remember talking really openly and honestly about myself, my situation, my behaviors. It was actually pretty freeing because I knew that it was benefiting me. Uh, it definitely furthered my self awareness and helped with certain behaviors immediately. I had, I think, a little bit of a temper issues, and I think that's something that really came about from that immediately. I was able to really get rid of those problems like almost immediately,
Mm,
and deal with that anytime I got really angry. But ultimately, it wasn't feasible at the time to continue with regular therapy, but I did know that I'd want to come back to it someday.
yeah. And it's great when you first, as a person, when you first start therapy, like being able to be so open and release any, sort of judgment that you might have with the person that you're sitting across from you because they're here to help you. And what is great too is being able to find those little aha moments where you can make it a quick win and change it for yourself for the better of being like, oh, I realize I'm getting angry here. And now I have a tool, or now I realize where this comes from. Really harnessing and then that self awareness and using it as a tool to make change in your life. With that being said, once you were divorced, what inner work did you focus on?
I wouldn't say I did a lot of inner work right away after my divorce. I definitely probably took a pause. I kind of focused on just having fun the first couple of years, and I did put off any therapy or self improvement. But I would think about it once in a while because I knew at some point I was going to have to get busy.
Yeah, well, I mean, no shame at all for wanting to take some break away from that. Like, honestly, even though I didn't do it, it's really important to make that space for yourself to try to just enjoy life in general and not like force yourself to get very serious and back into a relationship right away. Sometimes that's not ideal. So,
Y-
yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was going to take some time off and not really try to get immediately into a long term relationship. I knew there was going to be some just getting back into being single and dating or not dating and just, having time to myself and having fun.
When you think about that, what inner work did you uncover that made you realize you had things you needed to work through?
Well, after about maybe 3 or 4 years of just being single and dating and doing the dating apps, I really started to think about what I was actually doing and why I was actually doing it. I kept looking at profiles and swiping and sending messages, but the whole time I knew I wasn't really ready to get into an actual serious long term relationship because I hadn't done that work to improve myself, to make my next relationship better. So just every time I swiped, it got me that much closer to pushing myself to, doing something about it because I knew the time was running out because I did want to get into a relationship, but I also knew that I needed to do something for myself before that happened. So I remember actually thinking like a lot of times when I'm swiping on these dating apps, like I hope I don't actually meet somebody too great during this phase because I don't have the tools to do to make it what I want. So eventually I just had to dive in and start doing it.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like the swiping up on all these profiles and hoping that this guy would be someone that I could have a relationship with and not really thinking at the time like the type of work I would need to do for myself or what it would really take. I was just hurrying up to look for the next one. So it's kind of funny how we were in different places, obviously at different times in our post divorce. So, what did you do to start moving forward into the real relationship phase then?
So with the goal in mind of actually starting to get ready for a real long-term relationship, I just started reading some books. And I don't exactly remember where I saw these first two, but I remember they stuck out to me, which is why I bought them. And those were The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson and You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. So those were the two that really got me started. Then came Declutter Your Mind, How to Stop Worrying, Relieve Anxiety, and Eliminate Your Negative Thoughts. Now, I did go back to my Amazon purchase list to look these up, but I did remember that those were the first three I bought within a few months of each other. That really got me going because they looked interesting to me.
Yeah, and I would just be honest too, like I read You Are a Badass. That one was very helpful, like early on in my journey before I really started diving into even more specific self-help books for relationships and even just like mindset and like caring for myself. So when we met though, what were you actually working on?
I think I was actually still reading one of those. I'm pretty sure because I remember you noticed that I had The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck because I had it sitting out on my coffee table. I think along with those other two. I don't remember anything specific I was working on or goals I had at that point, but I know I did remember feeling slightly in a better place to meet someone at that time.
Yeah, so what's funny is like I do remember that book. First of all, it was on my Amazon wish list. Like I have a whole list. Brad knows this because I'm not allowed to buy books anymore off Amazon. I have a whole book list. But what was crazy is that it was listed as what you were currently reading on your Match profile, which gave me a hint as to your interest in personal development. So, honestly, this was just one of the handful of items on your dating profile that had me extremely curious and interested in getting to know you. Not very many men at the time listed what they were reading, let alone a book about self development. So, I knew that this was someone I would need to reach out to and talk to. So, how did our relationship bring the work you were doing front and center?
I think that the thing that jumps out to me the most is you introducing me to Dr. Brene Brown, and I probably haven't been the same since. After seeing all your Brene Brown books and you telling me about her, I bought Daring Greatly about 2 weeks after we first met. I rolled right through it, and I would say that was a game changer. There's too much to go into detail on her work and her writing uh, in this podcast, but it was so interesting and eye opening and unique to me. And I mean, I personally believe, and I think you believe too, her work can benefit anyone and everyone in some way. I actually started listening to her podcast too, and I wasn't even into podcasts at that time. I know you were, and you'd asked me
Oh
about
God, yeah.
podcasts, and I mean, I knew they existed. I just was not a podcast listener, and hers were the first podcasts I started listening to, and then just got hooked. I mean, I remember I got ahead of you on them. I would ask if you had heard this one or that one,
Yeah.
and
I started feeling so far behind.
yeah, I mean, I went on to read Rising Strong, Dare to Lead, and Braving the Wilderness, and then we bought Atlas of the Heart, and we still have to read that one, but
That one's a little different
we'll
type of
get to it.
book
Yeah,
for sure. We'll have to look at that together.
and yeah, I would just listen to her podcast, and anytime she mentioned a book, I would literally buy it right away. And by literally, I mean like I would be in my car listening, and I would grab my phone, go on Amazon, and buy that book. And like literally, that's how I got into Adam Grant and his books and his
Hmm.
podcast. Also, like Atomic Habits by James Clear. And there's been a bunch of other ones that just came from her guests and in her interviews that just kind of started making me branch out. And those were also authors that you knew about and
Yeah.
were already kind of into. So, like that whole process, just starting with her and then hearing about who she was talking to and what she was talking about, really got me open to learning about myself and buying those books and like, doing more inner work, to make my life better.
And you know what's really funny is that there was times where we would be listening to her podcast. Like I'd either be behind or it didn't matter. Like you were listening and I was listening separately, like in our own little worlds, either driving or when we're working out.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy this book for Brad and for Christmas. And I swear to God, we both bought, I don't remember what book it is, but we both bought the same book. Actually, there's one that you haven't had the chance to read, which ladies, I definitely recommend this one. It's not Dr. Brene Brown, but she had two authors come on and it's talking about burnout. I'll have to share that another time. You were going to read that. I read that.
Yes,
That one
I
to me
remember. I
was
still
like
have it.
underlining.
Yeah.
We might have to do a whole episode about our favorite books.
No, that would be good.
Because we have a library in my office. But you know what? Now that we've talked about the inner work that you've done, and I've just briefly mentioned a few things about me, what do you think we both need to work on or dig into, either together or separately?
Well, I think there's always things we can dig into separately. I mean, my goal is still to return to therapy at some point, but now with slightly different goals in mind. I think we both have some triggers that take us back to our previous relationships sometimes, and we revert to some bad or at least non-productive behaviors, like how we would have acted before in that
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we're both pretty self-aware, and we really communicate well, and we've been able to deal with those situations as they come up, and they're getting a little fewer and further between, but they're definitely still there. But I think the important thing is that when they happen, we're both aware of them, so that's at least that's a good step.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, for those that are listening, if you can go back to the parent and adult relationships episode with Christine Conti, she is my former coach of mine, and she's helping me and in the past helped me work through like where some of my triggers come from. And it's crazy because I thought I was fine with what this was, and it was like the family holidays situation just like gets me freaked out, have a ton of anxiety, and it's definitely from my ex-husband and his family situation. It has nothing to do with Brad or my parents. It's so weird how those things just like randomly pop up, and like I've been divorced from that person since 2011. So these things can stay with you for a long time if you don't work through them.
Yes.
And I know that there's other things, especially like right now, you're getting over being sick. I think I'm getting sick. So when I am tired, I have to have my self-awareness has to be really high, because if I don't, I catch myself like acting in ways that aren't necessarily my highest self. And so I can revert back to being someone that I don't like to be, that I have swear I've worked on before. I don't know if that you feel the same way when
I'm aware. Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of that too. So like, I know your behavior patterns and you know mine. So I
yeah,
try to anticipate that and know how to react and realize, no, you're not coming from a place of
crazy
being
bitch.
mean. You're getting tired, you're getting sick, or you're
I need a
hungry, or
Snickers.
yeah, you're hungry. So that's something. Yeah, I mean, that's something we both learned
Yeah.
how each other operate and how to handle that.
Oh yeah. It's just so great. It's a benefit of the pandemic sometimes, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure.
But now that you shared all this and your own inner work journey, why do you think men either put off doing the inner work or they just don't do it at all?
It's probably the same reasons as they don't do, or we don't do a lot of things. Number one, well, I don't have time for that. Everybody thinks they're super busy and they don't have time to start something new. Or maybe it crosses their mind once in a while, but they don't know how to make it a priority. A lot's probably being afraid of change or admitting that there's something that needs improvement or changing about yourself. Or maybe they think about it, but just really don't know where to start.
Yeah, I would have to say that that last part too, like all humans are afraid of change. And, the more that you practice change, whether it's something slight like taking a different route to work or trying something different to eat, it really does change your brain on being more receptive and curious to doing these things. Maybe it's just starting like with Brad, thinking of what you want to work on. Even just thinking about it might help start sparking that desire to do the inner work. And not knowing where to start, this stuff can be really overwhelming if you haven't even thought of doing it. And women, like, we are all about like trying to find ways to improve. Like, sadly, that's just part of society's culture that has told us we are either not enough in certain areas, that we need to work on things. And if I think about it from a high achiever athlete point of view, we don't like to be wrong. And sometimes I feel like, especially for men, it would be seen as a weakness if we want to do the inner work, if they want to do the inner
No.
work. But at the same time, like, it's not a weakness. It is such a strength for a man to go internal and to figure this stuff out. The amount of growth and strength that comes from this and wisdom is immensely life changing. I can't speak for Brad, but I would say that because of seeing you who you are now from what you've explained to me before, I can't even imagine being with someone who hasn't started at least the process of the inner work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it may be a weakness, but it's definitely a weakness, you want to address, in order to make your relationship better. It's just an area of improvement. I mean, I think just all depends on your perspective. Don't look at it as, oh, you're weak, you're a weak person. It just is a weakness that leaves you room for improvement. And if you want to have, a good relationship, it's going to help that.
Yeah, and just another thing to go off, like Brad had mentioned in the beginning, like we are all programmed in the beginning with what our parents, society, and whatnot, like our immediate surroundings. And when we become curious of all the other things going on in the world, all the other places to be, like think of how many possible different languages there are, or ones that there had been, or different types of food. Like there's so many different things to be curious about. So you have only been exposed to a very small fraction of things in our own world, that it opens up the possibilities to learn something new. So it's not necessarily a weakness. I probably should have not said that in the first place, but more or less like this is an opportunity to expand your knowledge and expand your reach of what is, limitless for you.
Right.
So then what sort of advice would you give men, Brad, who are thinking about starting this process?
Well, I would say, start with either something that you need to work on, or at least something that interests you. The book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, caught my eye because of the title, obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
and because I assumed it had to do with working on, not caring so much what others think or trying to please others. That's something I felt I could dig into first. That's something I was self aware of at the time. And then once you start the process, you can kind of search for things that sound interesting or helpful. I mean, you could go look for, Google self-help book reviews, and just, or for men specifically, or maybe certain topics, and just see if anything sounds familiar, see if anything resonates with you and what's going on in your life. The descriptions of those books, the things that people say who review them, the readers, not just like the critics reviews, but like the reader reviews. What did
Mm-hmm.
it help them with? Does that resonate with you? My guess is once you start doing that and you have a few aha moments, you want to keep going.
Yeah, and then now for the ladies, Brad, what advice would you give them as they're dating and looking for men who have done the inner work, or at least started the inner work?
Well, I think you need to find some ways to determine if the person you're interested in either has done some things or is at least interested in pursuing them at some point. When you're talking, find a way to work in conversation some books you've read. Ask them what types of books they like to read, or even you should be able to ask them at some point how they feel about self-help or inner work. If they're really a person interested in a relationship with you, then they should be able to talk about that, or at least be open to talking about it. If they're completely closed off to talking about it, or completely closed off to the idea, or saying I don't need self-help books, then I think that's a red flag.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump off there real quick too. Like, you can also do this in one other way. I used to like to ask, so what are you interested in your career? Like, where are you going? Like, what is an interest to you, or something to that fact? And like, they would talk about their job, and if they would talk about like my goal, one of my goals is this. First of all, if they talk about goals, huge, great. If they start saying, well, like, I'm really excited because I've done X, Y, and Z at this position, and I'm looking to hopefully get into management, or I'm looking to do X, Y, and Z within the company, like you can see that there's an interest, that they have go getter, they have goals, ambition in there. So to me, this is already a great way to segue into like, well, cool. It sounds like you're really doing some development for your career, but like, what are you doing to like for yourself? So men sometimes, from my experience before Brad, if I asked about self-help or inner work or like therapy, they would just instantly freak out. Like they'd freeze, or they'd be like, that's not for me, and blah, blah, blah. So like instead just be like, well, in order for me to continue developing as a person, like, yes, I'm doing XYZ at work, and I'm doing XYZ at the gym, but you know what, I'm really curious to be like, how can I strengthen my mindset, or like, how do I have an emotional intelligence, like little things like that, that are still very trendy topics. To see where they go with that conversation is really helpful. It also will then allow you to start talking about what is emotional intelligence, what is growth mindset, and get into those specific areas, and being like, oh, also I noticed that I self-sabotage because my mom's a people pleaser, and so am I, and I do this and this and this, and I would love your help to make sure that I don't do that in our relationship. Like all of a sudden the guy's like, sweet, I can help, I can provide and do this and this and this. And then they can kind of get that interest too. So like I want to segue into being like, yes, you can ask them specifically. Like, I could definitely ask Brad about therapy. I could totally, on our first date, even, I think we talked about shit like this,
Yeah.
but we couldn't talk about inner work right away. I feel like that word for some people is very off-putting, but once again, like when we were dating and being together during the pandemic, I feel like there's a lot of that mental health awareness that came up, so maybe things are a little bit different now,
Yeah.
that where you could bring it up. But if that's a different way that you want to talk about it, definitely start with the career, see how people are doing, developing themselves first in that area, and then talk about like, well, what are you doing for yourself outside of your career? Because sometimes people don't even think about it, and they might even just be open to it. They just haven't explored it yet.
Well, that's true. Yeah, yeah, let's give it an option.
Okay. Well, ladies, I really hope that you enjoyed listening to us today. Brad, thank you so much for sharing your side of the story. I really feel like it's very helpful for women to hear like that men can do the inner work. It just takes some time.
No, I'm glad to talk about it. I think you're right. I think it's something that needs to be addressed, and I'm glad I could, if I can help anybody with that, that's great. I definitely encourage women to try to find out if the people they're with are interested in that, and if they're not, maybe they could be, because it's good once you get a little, like I said, once you get a few aha moments, and you realize that there are some things you could, be a little better at, work on. It usually gets people motivated.
Yeah, definitely. Which brings up a good point, ladies. If you have a man in your life, brother, friend, or maybe a significant other, and you think hearing Brad's experience with inner work would shed some light on the process or how they can get started, please send this episode to them. Now, if you have a topic you want Brad and I to discuss on another couch conversation episode, you can go to my website, reinventingthearena.com/podcast. And on that page, you will find where you can suggest a topic. Well, ladies, thanks again for listening. And if there's any men, thank you so much for joining. We will be back again, hopefully soon.
Bye.
By now, you've heard about the one and only spreadsheet and how I used it to find my now husband. And trust me, it was more than just your everyday qualities list. The spreadsheet took me a few years to develop because I lacked the clarity of what I truly wanted in a partner and in a relationship. To be honest, clarity wasn't the only thing missing. It was dating with intention. Yes, I wanted to find a lifelong partner, someone who truly loved me for me. But I kept chasing after date with swiping, matching, and messaging as much as possible, completely ignoring the desperate energy that I was in. That's when I stopped looking at my spreadsheet as a list and started using it to date with intention. I created a process to gain the clarity of what I wanted in a man, a relationship, and vision for my love life. Then I developed a method to hold myself accountable to my vision. In all, I had 63 unique qualities, characteristics, and attributes that made up my spreadsheet of a dream man, relationship, and love life vision. When I had mastered my methodology and met my now husband, it didn't take me long, honestly, only a few weeks, to know I had met the man of my spreadsheet dreams. And now it's your turn. For the first time outside of one on one coaching, you can join me virtually in my Man of Your Spreadsheet Dreams workshop. Full details are coming soon. But if you want to secure your spot and guaranteed money off, join my email list by signing up for Lady Love Lessons. All you have to do is go to my website, reinventingthearena.com, and scroll down to the bottom of the homepage to sign up. I can't wait to help you create your own spreadsheet so you can find the man of your spreadsheet dreams.